I've hit the time of the evening where I get real tired and it comes out as little songs and dance. Do 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 do.
Or like a little brain lullaby to yourself.
Yeah, do you not get?
It's
It's like when
nearly
you've gone
sleepy
through the
time.
wall.
It's nearly sleepy time.
No, you've gone through the wall and you're out the other side,
Okay.
and you suddenly get the little bit
Overtired.
of like, I'm gonna rearrange the kitchen.
Oh yeah.
That's what
Oh
you
yeah.
know. That
It's
that thing.
10:30. I'm gonna mop the floor. Yes.
Hey, listeners.
Totally. Hey,
Welcome
is it a
to the
fire
Manic
day or a
Energy.
potato day? That's what Have you heard about this?
No, tell me Fire Day
Can
or
I go off on a
Potato
little
Day.
tangent? I should probably credit the person that I saw. I can't remember her name. Sorry. It was the thing about fire days and potato days. And so, there's my dog. Hello. Some days, some of us might have a fire day where you just do like a week's worth of stuff in a day.
Okay.
Might be cleaning, might be writing, might be doing work, all that stuff.
Yep.
And then that's great. And then it's followed by a potato day where you're like, what are clothes? How do I get out of bed? I do not want to. What is this?
And instead of framing them as having a good day or a bad day, it's just like the mix must be there. The balance must be upheld.
Fire day, potato day. And the important thing is to embrace the potato day and just label it. It's a potato day.
I really like crisps though. So if you pitch me the idea of having potato days, like I would just eat crisps. I would eat the lacquer things that we made in the woods today.
I know, talking of
over
potatoes,
and over and over again. If I could remember the Lithuanian phrase that we learned, that I spent about an hour this morning learning learning 3 Lithuanian words because somebody was like, "You're saying it wrong. You're saying it wrong."
We tried to make Lithuanian dumplings, and it actually became a hybrid of a Lithuanian dumpling and a kind of hash brown and a latke and a.
Okay. Get ready for the synergy. Get ready for the synergy because we took something that was very traditional, and we. We're both just reveling in how stupid this segue is, and we made it our own. And we made it our own, much like
excellent segue.
Much professional podcaster.
Oh my god! The folk traditions, which you're about to hear, listeners, our conversation with the artist and folk explorer. I'm calling him that. He doesn't call himself that. Ben Edge. If you don't know him and his work, seek him out immediately. Stop what you are doing and look upon his artwork and enjoy. You can look on YouTube and see his video for free. I think it's still up there. Frontline Folklore. You can get his book, Folklore Rising. You can follow him on Instagram. All these things. And we just had a lush chat. What did you say?
I'll hold up the book. What? There you go. People can see the book.
Oh, you're holding the book. Okay, yeah. Folklore Rising, an artist's journey through the British ritual year. And it's got a picture. Look, that's our local tradition, isn't it, there? It's got the Dorset Oozer on the front. If you don't know what the Dorset Oozer is, you need to get yourself into the Dorset Oozer. It's terrifying and amazing. We talked about, with Ben Edge, the reasons behind the current renaissance in folk tradition in the UK. We talked about the inspiration for his art and the reasons behind and the story. Oh, can you hear my dog really badly?
That's all right.
Is it all right? The inspiration behind his art and how he became interested in folk ritual, from seeing druids completely randomly one day to getting completely immersed in it. What else did we talk about? We talked about authenticity and history and new traditions and old traditions, about storytelling in community, what creativity really means, and how Forest School is perhaps placed in a good place to enable folk ritual to happen. So that's what we talked about, and I hope you enjoy it.
Before we get into that, though, obviously we need to do a massive shout out to all the people that are supporting us on Patreon. The support that these guys are giving means that we can keep doing the podcast, keep getting it out to people for free. So thank you to everybody that has joined us on Patreon. Lowest one's only £2 a month. £2 a month helps to support all this stuff, helps us to do these interviews, get the podcast out, get the software, get the microphones, all these things. So thank you very much.
Almost anything you can buy in a shop these days, isn't it? £2.
So much waffle chat for £2.
I know. I was trying to think about, it's the same as a cup of coffee. No, it isn't. It's double that now. Same as literally nothing. It's the cheapest thing you could possibly do. So
we do very much appreciate everybody that's shouting us out, that's supporting us, on Patreon. If you want to get your submissions in for Surprise Student, if you want to put somebody on the wheel for us to spin and do a session for them, or if you want to get your submissions in for wasn't on the job description, where we're going through submissions from people who have said, this is what I had to do in my role as a forest school leader, but it was absolutely not on the job description. And Wem and I will decide if it makes it onto our big job description that we are building over on the forestschoolpodcast.com. Please do send us your messages. The weirder the better. Absolutely. Please do keep sending us your stuff. You can get in touch with us on all the social media things. Look up the Forest School Podcast, or email admin@theforestschoolpodcast.com. We really like hearing from all the people, and we're chatting to quite a few people who are sending us voice notes and emails and stuff. It is really nice to hear back from everybody, because otherwise we're just waffling. We're just waffling into the wind. Just waffling into...
That's the new name of the podcast.
Waffling into the wind.
Listen, we need to stop now because you need to go to sleep. It's past your bedtime.
We've done it, but we're doing a Song Wars soon. We're doing a Song Wars.
God.
We're doing a Song Wars, and I'm putting it in this so that we have to do it. We're doing a Song Wars.
Yeah. Well, it's a good thing you did that, and it's a good thing you mentioned it today, because I'd completely forgotten.
There's going to be a new Song Wars. Somebody just turned off because they don't like Song Wars. Somebody stopped and said, "Get on with the interview, you stupid waffle."
Shush. Song Wars is not in this episode, just to be clear, just in case you're about to turn off. Don't turn off.
Or is it? I do the editing. Maybe I'm going to put it in somewhere in the middle.
Enjoy the words that will follow.
Enjoy the words that will follow. This episode of the Forest School Podcast has been sponsored by Tensile. There aren't many more iconic images of childhood than a treehouse, but the realities of rented sites or running sessions in public spaces means a treehouse is just out of reach for many outdoor leaders. But what if that treehouse could fit in a bag, be set up in minutes, and pack away just as fast? That's exactly what the Tensile Stingray can deliver for your sessions. The Stingray is a treehouse in a bag. It's lightweight, portable, and strong enough to support up to 400 kilos. Whether you're dealing with rocky ground, steep slopes, or boggy areas, the Stingray doesn't need flat terrain. It suspends between 3 trees, giving you a perfectly level platform wherever you go. It's fully weatherproof too. The 70D Rainfly is rated to 5000 HH, so you're covered in rain, snow, or wind. And the built-in insect mesh keeps out bugs, with the covered porch underneath giving you even more storage and shelter. It takes just 5 minutes to set up with 3 ratchet straps and 2 poles. There's no complicated knot work or construction knowledge needed. Plus, the included tree protector straps means there's no impact on the site. When the session's done, it packs down into a single rucksack-sized bag, leaving no trace behind. If you're ready to take your outdoor sessions to the next level, grab a Stingray and give it a try.
Listeners, we're here with Ben Edge, and I'm so excited that you're here, Ben. I came across your film, I think, first, and your Instagram stuff, and then Lewis, you got given the book for Christmas, Folklore Rising, didn't you?
Fantastic. All my stickies.
And then somebody bought it for me the other day, and I got it on Audible as well. So I've got it in all the formats, and it's a real pleasure to speak with you. So thank you so much for giving us the time today.
That's really kind of you to say, and it's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, pleasure. So we were just talking about how in your studio we can see on the camera this amazing white horse behind you, which you were explaining was going to be part of a sculpture for your next exhibition, and we weren't recording at that time, and I think it would be interesting for our listeners to know about it. So tell us what the horse is going to be.
Right, so it's some years ago now. I painted one of the folk traditions that I covered that you would have read about in my book and in my Frontline Folklore series called the Garland King. So it's Garland Day in a town called Castleton, where there's a horse or a man on a horse draped with a huge garland that kind of covers him, turning him into like half man, half plant. And it was one of the first things that I actually painted in this kind of realm. And I wanted to do something more with this idea of the flowers and a horse. The idea is developed from covering a whole horse with flowers, and now it's gone back to the simplicity of doing something around the Garland King. So it's going to be a big sculpture at my solo show, which I haven't actually officially announced yet, but it's going to be at the Fitzrovia Chapel in London in November of this year. So all my latest work, it's going to be a lot of work going in there, about 20 paintings couple of sculptures, a film. It's basically my last big show was Ritual Britain in 2021, and this is the follow up. So exciting times.
Yeah.
So you're still finding this. Oh, go on, Lewis.
No, go on, man.
I was just going to say, you're still finding this really fertile ground then, this sort of exploration of folk and
Yeah,
ritual.
yeah. Well, there's no end to it for me. There's no end at all to it. Basically, it's not just the traditions themselves; it's what they kind of reveal to me. I suppose what I'm already thinking, something could be brought out when I witness a folk tradition. So there's an element of like self-exploration, and I think it is for anybody. There's, you don't quite know what draws you to these things. For example, when I first, the very first thing I went to was a druid ceremony that you may want to talk about later. And, I didn't know why I was there. It was an accidental discovery, but what I meant was I didn't know why I found it so fascinating. And it's been a journey kind of untangling what it is about it that really captured me. And it gets clearer and clearer with the more things I do and the more pictures I paint. And I've kind of developed a artistic style and unique voice, I suppose, so it says a lot that within these things that are for everyone and collective, that you can find yourself too. It's about individual and the collective, which is what's so cool.
Yeah.
Do you see the art that you're the stuff that you're making? So because in the film and the book and the paintings and things, you're like, you said the phrase you used just then was like bringing it out, like bringing something out of these traditions. Do you see, so the paintings that you do of an event, do you then, in your mind, do you see that as like, now that painting is also part of the tradition, like it sort of goes into the box with the event for those communities? Does the painting belong to the communities, or is it more in the sense of like it's on the outside and I've captured a moment in time?
Yeah, I think it's about it. I wouldn't say it belongs to communities. I love the idea that the communities embrace them when they do and stuff, but the communities are living these traditions. They're the beating heart of them. They don't need an artist to come and paint them. It's already happening. So for me, it's a personal experience, something that I've, for whatever reason, been drawn to. I've had to book train tickets, hotels, or B&Bs. I travel. I take hundreds of pictures. I spend the whole day, whatever time it starts to whatever time it ends, and socialize and get involved. And then I kind of go home and it's in there in my mind. And then, I always think it's interesting that, in these communities, they practice processions yearly, and it's like everything that's happening in the world around them can be processed in a way by the ritualistic act of the procession. So I like the word process. So I think it's my way of processing my experiences and what the traditions kind of have an effect on me and what they say to me about, I suppose, just being human, I think.
Yeah, that's so interesting. You said that, like that mystery that you're trying to explore about why you're drawn to these things. I think a lot of people and a lot of our listeners will probably identify with, and I certainly do, in terms of, in a similar way, kind of just like being in a place. We live in Devon, and just over the last probably 10 years of being here, I've just been in a place, and then Morris dancers have turned up, and I didn't know they were going to be there, and I'm just like, okay, now I have to stand and watch all of this Morris dancing and jiggle around and make my kids really embarrassed, and they're like, stop dancing. And so now I've joined a Morris side 2 years ago.
No way. That's great.
Yeah. So I dance with Otter Morris in East Devon, and
Brilliant.
And yeah, I don't know if I could explain what draws me to it either. It's kind of like, I don't know, and a lot of people wouldn't agree with that. They'd be like, oh God, Morris dancing, that can get in the bin. It's just so cringe and awful. But there is something about it being human and being sort of almost like primal or in the DNA somehow, even if, which is something I wanted to talk to you about, even if somehow a lot of these traditions we might think of as ancient, and actually they turn out to not be that ancient. And I wanted to see what your sort of experience of that was. So, for example, when I started dancing with the Morriside, they go, okay, now we're dancing the dance gingerbread, and we're going to teach you
Yeah.
gingerbread. I'd be like, okay, cool, great. What's the history of this dance? I ask, why is it called gingerbread, and what do these moves mean? And they're like, oh, so and so wrote it, and they were eating gingerbread at the time, and they just,
Yeah.
and it's actually written not very long ago, and it doesn't necessarily have any special meaning, but maybe the dance steps used to, but now it's a modern interpretation and all this kind of thing. So what do you think about that, about like traditions that maybe aren't as ancient as we think they are? They might be Victorian, or they might even be like brand new. Like, have you experienced many of those in your sort of pilgrimages around looking at ritual?
Yes, absolutely. So I kind of work in cycles, in series. So the body of work that we go into my next show is called Children of Albion, and the one before that was called Frontline Folklore. And within that series, there were very much traditions that have roots in the past. But like you say, some of them not far back as you first think. But then at the same time, I do question who writes history. The fact that you mentioned that gingerbread song, maybe the tune's ancient, so it evokes a feeling. And also, the more you get into this stuff, I remember actually being a bit disappointed at first when you heard stuff like that. Well, it's not old, it's not,
same.
and like it's not interesting anymore. But then as time passed, it kind of flipped, where it all became one human thing for me. So like my latest series, Children of Albion, a lot of it's about modern traditions, people that are like kind of looking to the past to make new traditions. So for me, the way I look at it is people have danced around the wheel of the year since the inception of, social beings, whenever that came to be. So I just feel that like you're part of a lineage, and whether the costumes change, where you do it changes, it's kind of irrelevant, because I invented this thing called folklore activism, because it's almost a privilege now to have access to. Obviously, it's growing. There's been what I call a kind of renaissance of interest, but I didn't grow up with anything like this that I was aware of. So for me, after stumbling on the Druids accidentally on Tower Hill, which sparked all this, which is coming up to its 10th anniversary when that actually happened, I then had to go and actively seek these things. And then by actively seeking them, they seemed to plug me back into something that had been missing from my life. I was in a really depressed way at that point, and it like flipped a switch in me, and it's one of those things that was that is yours, but it was missing. So it was almost like something that was in you anyway, that you didn't have access to it. So I feel like anybody engaging in these things are basically accessing an element of their humanity that they may not have had access to. So it's a kind of activism. And so that for me now, obviously, coming from that mindset, the idea of how old they are has just been completely shattered, and it doesn't really matter to me. Yeah. There's a romance to the ones that are old, but that's just part of the fun of that particular one. And it doesn't cheapen. Yeah.
There's a bit early in this Folklore Rising book where you're talking about the finding of the Druids and it's watching them come across. And one of the things that's really resonated with me, and it's similar to this thing about like authenticity and how old something is, and like I think I for a long time have had this kind of view of like, older means more authentic, means more credible, means more all those things. But there's a bit in here where you're talking about you saw the Druids walking past, and you make note of the fact that they're wearing like running trainers, like sneakers. And how for you that made it more authentic because it wasn't a costume, and that was a complete a completely different lens to anything I'd looked at before. Because I think I would have looked at it and gone, I haven't even finished the costumes. How's it? But framing it as like, no, people have been doing that in their shoes, the shoes that they have every day. And so by doing it in these things, and then that, for me, framing it like that opens up so many more things in terms of like, because I do think, like you say about, you've gone like physically had to travel a lot to get access to these things. But I think for a lot of people, one of the barriers that they can feel to these traditions and these activities is authenticity, or I'm not exactly from that village. I'm not exactly wearing the right jumper. Oh, I haven't exactly, have you come across that kind of thing where this kind of realism and like modernism is helping to break down a barrier about that kind of costuming.
Yeah, well, I suppose that what you do have to respect when you go to these things is there is a traditional element to it, where it's like a community who are the ones that are working hours outside their day, kids, or whatever jobs they're doing. I've met people that are nurses, long distance lorry drivers, all sorts of things, and they're in their spare time meeting weekly for committees, raising the money needed, making the costumes. So I've always had that respect that I'm not part of the spectacle. But what I do find is that you're more than welcome as a spectator, and people like it when they can see you're getting joy from it and being part of it. But then you obviously have different types of traditions, like Jack in the Green, for example, where the people that come and watch it will dress in green, and the lines blur between the procession and the audience. So I think it just depends on the type of community. How old it is does have an impact on that, actually. The ones that are more rooted in the past are very much established within the structure. But say, for example, when I went to a new tradition, such as Boss Morris's recent spring tradition they call Finger in the Spring, which is new. And, they're obviously the processional dancers, but it was all just kind of makeshift fun. And so I think I know there's this idea of like shaping the customs to suit what people want from it, but I've always understood that like they are what they are, and you just got to enjoy the nature of them. They're like a collective artwork of a community, generations or in less older ones, just individuals have shaped it. So I enjoy that side of it, and I feel that you're part of it just by being there, actually, witnessing it.
There's that thing of it being, is it about the past and the story and the reason behind the ritual, or is it about it's about the present moment, so it's like
it's about all of those things at once.
Yeah.
That's why I put all the different ages at once within the paintings.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Can you say a bit more about that for some people who might not be as familiar with your artwork?
Yeah, so within my paintings, my process originally was to go to the communities and kind of speak to people about the story that they believe is the origins, and these are like word of mouth, passed down tales, folklore, and I will take elements of that and I will look into the origins and all stuff like that myself and find elements of the history and create scenes within the contemporary scenes. So it's like the ancient and the present walking side by side, and that for me is what I feel when I'm at these things. There's this like kind of spectral presence of all the generations that have been involved and all the people, and even going beyond these specific traditions and just people that have engaged in like nature worship of whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, that's another really like again another lens that I think looking at your work and stuff has given me is this framing against flipping things on my head that I wouldn't necessarily have considered. Framing things like my I want to say upbringing, my exposure to kind of like paganism and the link between that and Christianity and the modern as Britain is now has always been framed around this idea of like Christianity goes, and the framing was more around like goes and eats traditions. It goes and says like, oh, Easter, yeah, as long as it's about our thing, you can keep doing Easter, or as long as and that because if you go to different countries, all these traditions that call themselves Christian are very localized, and that's quite interesting. And then framing it through your work and this idea, there's a bit in a few places where you're talking about this like nature worship and possibly like early paganism stuff, and the way you frame it is as hiding inside Christian festivals for survival and being like, this is just how we're going to get through, that it's such an old thing. It's like really almost like weathering a storm and being like, just put these clothes on, let these people do their thing, we're going to stick around and do that thing. Is that something that you always, that kind of lens, is that something you've always viewed that relationship as, or did that come out through doing this kind of project?
I think it kind of came out. Well, I suppose it's less that I think they're hiding. I think more say any new belief system that you were to take on now, and there's elements that you love about your life, you're going to keep those, and you're going to merge it with a new thing. So it's just it's a hybridity thing. It's like you take a little bit of something, you mix it with something else, and you get the new. It's kind of what we do as artists, really. We kind of pick a subject matter, we have all our influences, start, and then the new kind of comes out. So it's kind of, yeah, I suppose I see it a bit like that. I feel like it's a continuous mongrel, really. And that's why it's a great metaphor for being British, because I'm currently working on this painting called Children of Albion, it's a huge 300 by 200 centimetre painting that tells the whole history, or attempts to tell the whole history of Britain within one kind of mad landscape.
Oh yeah, just do it. Just the whole history of Britain. Just knock it out.
Yeah, and I did so much research into this, and it really breaks down any kind of manacles in your mind of this idea that we're one thing here. Obviously, we know more about recent immigration, but actually, it's the story the whole time.
Oh, the whole island is just, and this group came, and this group came.
Yeah. It's so interesting. We were talking.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. We were talking about this at a National Forest School conference a couple of years ago, and I went so the idea of that is lots of forest school people getting together, lots of people volunteering to run workshops about really wide-ranging things, from kind of your traditional spoon carving or woodwork to a workshop that I went on, which I can't remember exactly what it was called, but it was about process of honouring the land that comes from Australia, was developed with Aboriginal tribal people and young people together, and I wish I could remember the name of it, but I can't right now. It's escaped me. And they want to share this way of honouring the land and being at one with the land over the globe. They go, this is our cultural tradition, but actually we really love lots of, especially young people and community groups, people like forest school people, anyone who does outdoor education, to use this way of connecting to the land and understand some of our traditions. And the workshop leader had brought an amazing carved stick which was full of symbolism, and it was very much like, we want to share this cultural identity with you. And a lot of their practices will start by honouring the rightful owners of the land, saying, acknowledging that you are working on land that doesn't belong to you in Australia and that's been taken from the original people. And so the workshop leader, where we were in Essex, was talking about sort of honouring the ancestors of the place where we were right now. And that brought up such an interesting discussion, because she was saying, I did some research and I found that, like, the Celtic tribe that kind of lived here were these people, so maybe we might want to think about them and how they were using the land and things. And then we're all like, yeah, but like, who is the original people? Like, are they the original people of Britain? Like, they're, and then it became more of a discussion. Say again?
But yeah, they're in there somewhere, but there's a mix of everyone that's come since. Yeah.
And I love that about where we live. I love that about it's not just been a fixed thing that has then like shifted. It's almost like, if you're kind of investigating the spirit of place or your connection to a place, whether that be a village that has a procession or a forest school setting or something like that. It's almost like the footsteps of the myriad different types of people who have traversed that land is what makes it so rich, and as you say, and so mental. Do you know what I mean? Like, all these rituals they almost don't, for me, seem to have even the things that in your book, there are obviously some themes that are similar, like, for example, being draped in garlands or covered in plants and things like that. And there are like different themes, aren't there, that come up. But some of them you think that isn't at all related to any other tradition that I can see. It might be the time of year, might be the same, but like obioses, for example, like the stuff like Padstow with the good bit massive shining disc.
They're just mad.
That one's that's the best example we can actually draw from, because the research that I did into the Padstow story, you can't say anything's fact because it's all conjecture-y, and it could be true, it could not be true, and that's what I love about it. But the best story is, the strange mask that was introduced has the initials OB on there. And one of the local stories is that there was a sailor, because it was the people of Padstow would have been sailors and stuff going back, a few hundred years. And when people were first getting out to the New World, there's a tradition in Papua New Guinea with a really similar mask. And
Wow.
I always get confused. It's the duk duk or tuk tuk. My dyslexia gets stuck. I can never remember which, but it's one of the two: duk duk dancers or tuk tuk dancers. And it's the mask is remarkably similar. So one of the suggestions is a sailor saw this tradition and thought, wow, it's a bit like our May Day thing. I'm going to bring back a mask, and introduced it to the May Day. Then maybe people would have started making their own versions of that mask, and that's kind of what I'm talking about, this cultural hybridity. And this is exactly what these things are all about. Funny enough, I'll show you something. I went out to Pittsburgh for an exhibition I did a few years ago, and this was born out
Oh
of
my
because
gosh.
I'm really interested in like outsider art and folk art, and there's this amazing place in Pittsburgh called Vault Art Studios where they look after all these artists with special needs, and they're all kind of talented artists, but they need to be looked after and stuff. And there was an artist there called Kim Bond, who she has this personal mythology of the folklore out there really is aliens and Bigfoot and stuff like that. And she has a personal mythology that she, in her dreams, aliens come to her, Bigfoot comes to her, and they talk to her about the environment and how they're here to help, and people need to stop fighting wars, and she's just paints scenes from her dreams, and she's actually created a whole universe really of planets and galaxies. She's an incredible artist. And after I was there with my little catalogue from my last exhibition, gave her one. She was looking through it and she was like, "Oh, I've seen him." And it was a picture of the Green Man. I think he's come to me in one of my dreams. And then anyway, I get back to England and I get a message from the people at Vault Art. I bought some work and been in contact with them and stuff. And they said, "Oh, Kim's being visited by the green Sasquatch." And this is now something she's started painting. So, that's it. That's two cultures coming together, and out of that you get the new, and that for me is exactly what folk culture is.
If I
It's a
ever
collective.
go into professional wrestling, I'm going to be called the Green Sasquatch. That's it. I'm trademarking. I want that as my wrestling name.
You have to talk to Kim.
Oh my god. Yeah, trademark.
Yeah.
This episode of the Forest School podcast is brought to you by Chris Holland's Nature Connection. Are you looking to deepen your connection to the natural world? We're thrilled to share the Plant of the Week collection by Chris Holland, a long-time friend of the show and someone we've been lucky enough to call a peer and friend for many years now. This beautifully crafted A4 book is packed with 54 plant profiles, seasonal insights, poems and proverbs that bring each plant story to life. It's a brilliant resource for anyone on their forest school leader training journey or for sharing with parents and support staff who want to expand their nature knowledge and feel more confident in the great outdoors. What's more, it's perfect for forest school sessions, helping you to explore plants likely growing right near your site or home, all while nurturing curiosity and connection with nature. Each profile even includes QR codes for instant access to even more information, ideal for on-the-go learning. Chris has poured decades of passion and expertise into this collection, and we know it will be a valuable companion in your work or play in nature. And because he's a friend of the show, we've got something very special for you to use. Use the discount code FORESTPOD at checkout and save 15% when you order through the link in our show notes. Don't miss out. Whether you're a seasoned forest school leader or just starting your journey, the Plant of the Week collection is a treasure trove of inspiration and knowledge. So head to the link in the show notes, grab your copy, and remember to use the code FORESTPOD for 15% off. Thanks again to Chris for sponsoring this episode.
And that is, I guess, what it means to be human, isn't it? It's like seeing other humans doing something and going, "That's cool. I'm going to copy that, but I'm going to mix it with that other thing." And that is
make
definitely
it my own.
Make it my own, and then it becomes really important. And I'm going to teach other people about it. And that definitely happens at our forest school. We talk a lot about
I can
how
imagine. Yeah.
It's just, it's a place for play for children, little children, families, and then we've got like home ed groups and kids up to sort of 13, and these kind of traditions or happenings will happen in a certain part of the woods, or something will be named something, or there'll be a story of remember when that happened. And and those names and those stories will remain even after the children who are actually involved have left, you know, and those stories continue.
They remain.
And it's
It's still
really cool
called
to
the
watch.
Badger Treehouse. There was never a badger there. Someone 8 years ago was like, "That's the Badger Treehouse."
Yeah,
that kid has
And it's
got
stuck.
their own kids
It's
now,
stuck.
and it's but that's what it is, and it's a very
storytelling. Sorry, carry on.
I was going to say it's a weird position we're in as like, because we are, and you must have met people like this as you're doing the work, where like you're saying, the people that are on the committees and stuff, where Wem and I are there, you know, have been there for a decade, and we have held these stories as they come and pass, and we've watched people pass them on, but we've been quite static in terms of like, and trying to work out where the line is in terms of, for me, I'm always conscious, like I don't want to wholeheartedly put stuff onto people and go like, well, now you've joined, you have to do this, and this is the way we do it. But to let it pass almost peer to peer between the kids, to go, you guys can tell each other about this thing if it comes up. If it doesn't come up, that's kind of the sign that this thing has passed on or moved. You know, have you met people that are holding that space, and where they find the line between, you know, keeping a tradition going for a community versus kind of going, the community has moved on, or the community doesn't, you know, is doing different things now?
I think people get disgruntled when things get changed slightly in some communities. I've seen that. Other people embrace that. It's like any human environment. It's mixed of all sorts of opinions and types. And, you know, I think it's quite difficult for some people that have done, you know, been the main character in a procession, or and then they've had to pass it on, and then they have to see how the new person puts their stamp on it.
That's going to be hard.
That's hard for people. So I think there's a bit of that goes on. But when it comes to the idea of them being like stories being passed down, I think that like it's human nature to tell a story, and a little bit of you goes into it. So that's why I like the idea of them being like collective stories. It's like that. I grew up with a family of, you know, great storytellers, and I always remembered noticing that some of the stories would evolve. Even people would change, because the person telling it would forget who it happened to exactly, but it didn't matter because it was part of the collective family identity, and that was my folklore. So I think that's what I feel like about it. It's like it's a collective force. So there's going to be all sorts going on within it, but then bring it all together, have the manifestation of the tradition.
Do you think we are unique? You know, I'm thinking about the last like 30, maybe 40 years, and how we consume cultural things. There's a thing. So when I was doing there's a thing in music where you talk about like relative pitch and absolute pitch and things like, so like Happy Birthday is a song anyone can sing. Doesn't matter where the starting note is, because people know the intervals and they just know the pattern. Whereas something like a TV show, if you start on the wrong note, people know it's the wrong note, and they're like, no, that's not right, because the first note has been fixed. And I was thinking about like this kind of, you know, storytelling is a really good example where like we often have people come to our groups who maybe have only or primarily been exposed to storytelling as a like, I'm going to hold up the big book in front of the class and I'll read it, and the story of the, you know, gingerbread man is the same story each time, because the words are the same each time, the pictures are the same each time. And then if they hear us tell it and we put a slightly different thing on, or we go off on a tangent, and for some people that's like great dopamine, novelty, yum 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 yum, and for some people it's like, you've changed it, what are you doing? You know, do you think the last, and I'm thinking about, you know, this cultural stuff that we consume over the last 30, maybe 40 years, as we've moved to like more print media and more film consumption, are we moving to a place where like younger people are needing more exposure to these kind of wobbly edged traditions to give them those kind of freedoms of like, storytelling's a bit wobbly, and you know, these processions are a bit wobbly, we don't have to go down that road, it's okay if we go down this one, you know? Do you find that?
I do. Well, I think what you're saying is, it's like we live in a world where it's almost like everyone needs their own personal online brand or celebrity status. You know, even if they're not a celebrity, they have to sell a kind of lifestyle. But there's something about the white. Well, and this is what these things have always done. You know, many of these traditions were the idea of turning the establishment on its head, the Lord of Misrule and all that. So I think there's this element where everyone can just be wild and free, and it's not about, you can make a mask and it's not about going in a gallery. It's just about wearing it, and you can sing. And there's amazing music you hear in the pubs and stuff, and it's just people going for it, you know. And it's not like ever going to be recorded or heard by anyone outside that room. It's just something really soulful and amazing about that for me. And this idea of like just doing something creative and it not being about a career, it not being about, it has no limits to it because it's got no rules really. I talk about like the processions of particular outfits and stuff, but I just mean like the creativity within that is, there's a wildness to it that people I think definitely miss maybe. Like,
Yeah.
and
it's not about selling it. It's not about making
no,
money. It's
no,
not
exactly.
creativity to sell on a market stall or on Etsy. It's like, that's
well,
pretty rare, isn't it?
Creativity's almost been stolen from people and repackaged as a career. It's like, oh, you're only creative, you do a creative job and stuff. But like what I've witnessed is like people, like, well, I grew up with that a bit, you know, like my grandfather worked at Smithfield's meat market, and my uncles and my dad's a graphic designer, but he made art in his spare time. You know, you can say graphic design's art as well, but I mean like visual art and drawing, and then everyone in my family just were like really talented at art. But for my granddad, the idea of just doing it beyond a hobby was absurd to him. He was just happy working at the meat market and stuff. So I grew up in an environment where art was about just making art for the fun of making art.
Yeah.
So I felt really at home when I was around that. And then I'd speak to people at these, I'm not an artist, I don't know anything about art. And I was like, you do, look what you've created, you know? So I think there's like a reclamation of the creativity that's in all of us that's kind of stolen by, I suppose, you know, maybe just like the rules of society, like you're meant to be this, you're meant to be that, you can't be creative and you can't do that. You know, I'm all for this idea of like just doing creative things for doing creative things, you know?
Yeah.
And so much of
That's
that is
it.
built in like in the education system. A lot of that is like, how are you introduced to creativity, or how are you introduced to art? And is it always getting graded, or is it always getting sent home because everything you make must be then presented to the people at home and like given a, you know, as opposed to like, that was fun and it's gone. We're done. You know, we've done the thing, and smushing it up. And again, that's one of the I take slight joy in the whole Lord of Misrule turning things on the head. I do take a lot of joy in making something out of clay in front of a group and then smushing it, because there's something very powerful about just smushing it in front of people and being like, no, I'm done. And the response of like, but you went into your time, you did the thing. I'm done. I'm done. You know, it's very powerful modeling. And I think all the folklore type things do model that for us quite a lot, you know, model that kind of moving things through.
You've just reminded me, Ben, of like how I grew up in Dorset, and my mum being really creative, but me seeing her making creative stuff for the carnival, which I didn't realise when I was a kid wasn't a national thing. I honestly thought every time
everyone did it,
a carnival in autumn time. And then I had a partner at the time from Birmingham, and I got him to come along, and he was like, what is this? What are you doing? And it's basically, for anyone who doesn't know, in the West Country of England, I'm sure that they probably do it other places too, but it's like tractors towing flatbed lorries with people dressed up, often playing music, singing. And it's not folky in that old sense. It's not like beautiful folk instruments and country dancing. It is like a pop song from the 70s, and everyone dressed up in the theme of that pop song and then dancing, or being statues, like big horses like the one behind you, you know, made out of things that people have just made, like in a barn somewhere.
Brilliant.
And then like
Sounds
people
great.
Dressed up as knights and ladies on the back of horses with knights in white satin playing over like some tinny megaphones sort of thing. And if you were in the carnival, you had a theme and you made the costume, or your parents made the costume. So I'd be like, a jam jar that my mum has made
Yeah,
out of
brilliant.
cardboard and gloss
Yeah.
paint, and spent hours on this costume so that me and my mates can be like a jam jar and a packet of spaghetti
Yeah.
and some other food
Yeah.
stuffs. And then, as you say, it just goes in the bin, and you just
Yeah.
watch this
It was a great
process.
time. The joy
It
of
was just,
making it, joy
yeah.
of, having fun with your friends. Yeah, it's what it's all about. It's why you start making art, as a kid, and then somewhere along the line, you're told you're not good enough, or, you don't have the time, I don't know what, but, yeah, so that's great.
Yeah.
Mm.
Or you're really good and therefore you should sell that. You could sell that.
Yes.
Oh, that's really good. You could sell it.
Yeah.
Which just,
And
yeah.
people treat that as the
Yeah.
highest compliment, telling you that you should
Yeah.
sell it. People give that as if
Yeah.
like that's the
You've
best
made
thing
it.
I can say about it is that
Yeah.
you should sell it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, kind of changing tack a little bit about, and I'm sure you probably get asked this a lot, but it's really apparent through your films and your books and your art that you're noticing this, as you called it, like a renaissance of folk, at least in Britain. And yeah, you probably get asked this a lot, but have you got any theories about why you think that might be happening now?
Yeah, I do, because I've, a lot of people put the word revival on it, which I passionately hate, because because I feel like it's really disrespectful to all the people that do it all the time, and have always done across the centuries. The reason it's a renaissance, in my idea, is because what it is it's people that are disconnected from this culture that is very much a human need within us, like this kind of innate need to like celebrate the wheel of the year, feel plugged into something larger than ourselves, that has made people, maybe subconsciously think, I need to get back to that. And you see the folk culture in it, and it gives you this kind of feeling of something lost, like I mentioned earlier. And I feel that like it's influencing people from all walks of life, as people like yourselves, communities, all sorts of things. The whole sustainability idea for me is wrapped up within it, because if you're caring about where you live by plugging into like the idea of it being part of something bigger, as part of the wheel of the year, part of nature, it's a kind of psychological shift. So that's one huge part of it for me. It's this idea of climate change. When I had my depression, I was completely disconnected from anything beyond just my urban environment that I was in. And when that snapped me out of it, should we say, it was a psychological shift. I was still in the city, but I was somewhere else, and then the decisions you make kind of change. So I think that's why a lot of artists in particular see merit in it. I think it's a very relevant thing to be making work about right now, this idea of climate and climate change. And then on top of that, it's obviously the monoculture of capitalism. So when I was a kid, I do remember, I'm 39 now, I do remember there was a bit more of like specialist shops. You'd have like a really good sweet shop with all the jars, and you'd have like little independent makers. Then they seemed to just disappear, and every high street was the same. It was like McDonald's, Burger King, Wimpy, that's
big
gone,
chains.
but you know what I mean? Yeah, big chains, Woolworths and stuff. And then it all just became boring, like one of the same old things. So I think that like there's just such a dullness to it. And I think people are like wanting to celebrate or re-enchant is the word that I use, and some friends of mine. It's like this idea of re-enchanting the magic of the world around you. You can do that through this stuff. Even stories. If you walk out of like where my dad lives in Shoreditch, and you find out that up this street, Shakespeare once did a play in this building, or all of a sudden that's a magical street to walk down. So I think it's just about re-enchanting the world, reminding ourselves that it's not too late, and there is magic still in the world. And then it's tied up in Britain specifically, and Europe, I suppose, with the idea of this kind of post-empire confusion of national identity. So it's like my generation were very, when you turned on the telly, it was always like Booze Britain, and everyone just getting paralytic and falling in. It was like a kind of rejection of like,
Propriety.
yeah, it was just like no one really wanted anything to do with there was no identity in a way. It was like, no, I remember feeling like I rejected it. Like I don't want anything to do with it. But like that was in hindsight, I think that was like, I suppose that generation needed to do for the next generation, to look at them and think, this isn't the answer. We need to reconnect to something. So I feel like people are like grow a new national identity they can be proud of, that they can relate to, that's also inclusive for
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, I really wanted to ask you
Yeah,
about that, about the inclusivity,
yeah,
because I mean, it is inevitably political, isn't it? All this folk stuff, it has a political edge, um, and I think that kind of goes both ways in terms of inclusion and the other way. So, like one example of like, because there is that thing, isn't there? Like you're saying about British identity, there's something quite distasteful about English identity, specifically, I think, for a lot of people, our generation, and the St. George Cross is seen really not as a good symbol for,
yeah,
the people that I hang around with. It is a
yeah,
symbol of something that we don't identify with and is seen as quite dark, really. And there are elements of maybe old tradition that maybe can sit alongside that a little bit, like Morris dancing and blackface, that kind of
yeah,
political issues that then become kind of
yeah,
blurry, and maybe like, this is how we've always done things and this is the way it's going to be, and that
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like holding on to like
yeah,
English
yeah,
values or whatever. But then there's the other kind of political side of it, in terms of, as you're saying, like being in touch with nature, being in touch with climate change, acknowledging that, trying to
yeah,
make a new a new culture that maybe is more inclusive.
yeah,
And there's still debates about that, like in the Morris dancing community there's still debates, even about things like how inclusive should you be as a side, because if you really want the dancing to be good quality, maybe you shouldn't be inclusive because you should only accept people who can really do it well. Do you know what I mean? Like those kind of
yeah,
debates happen all the time on social media. And
yeah.
I wondered if do you think that folk practices are on the whole becoming more inclusive in terms of the things that you've seen?
Yeah, I do. I think it's more to do with the people that it's like anything in life, isn't it? Like if I go to a folk tradition, I'm projecting my internal world onto it, and that's why I kind of need to paint, I suppose, as an artist. And if you're like one of these like traditionalists or slightly on the right, you're just going to look at it like that, like
Yeah.
preservation. And but I think that what's changed and why it's a renaissance, not a revival, is because it's not more of those people. It's a whole new world of people coming along and doing something more inclusive with it and creating more inclusivity. But I also think that's to do with the fun element of it, because when you're starting something new, you're kind of just like like a bit giddy and like excited, and you're with your friends. But like if you're like honorably accepted into this Morris dancing side, there's an established order that you're going to be part of. So it's quite a different experience coming in.
It's
So I think
hard to
that,
do new
there's,
things and solemnity. You've got to kind
yeah,
of ditch the solemnity when you're doing something new and be like,
exactly.
stuff's going to go wrong. Yeah, this is going to be
Yeah.
funny,
I'm kind of, I'm kind of all for it though too. Like there's got to be space for everyone. It comes, if like there's a sign in your town and you don't like what they stand for, like, why would you want to join them? Like, let them just get on with it. If they're all happy, like just start your own side and do something fun and exciting for you. I think, it works both ways.
Yeah.
Have you
Yeah.
had there's my I appreciate we can skirt around this if it's going to be quite a personal thing, because you were just talking about the paintings and the artwork that you create are your way. You said right at the start there, your way of processing things, and
Yeah.
also that you were saying your internal world is sort of getting projected onto those things. In terms of like feedback, what so obviously there's going to be some people that are really like from those communities that are like, that is great, you've really captured the essence of
Yeah.
what it is and the history of the thing. I wondered if you'd had feedback of people who are going, well, that's not my internal world projected on that thing,
Well,
and how do you feel
yeah,
about that,
yeah.
and whether they would say that to your face or not, or you know
Well, you know what? But the thing is, I suppose a lot of like yourselves and stuff, more creative kind of backgrounds. A lot of the people that are in the traditions I go to, they're just kind of like working people that love their cult, their tradition. There's already like maybe the local artists, like a lot of the windows you'll see paintings that people have made, local amateur paintings and stuff. It's I suppose me painting it isn't. It's not a big deal to them, and maybe they'll just make a joke of it because they're all kind of like got that English humor, like banter, like So I feel like, yeah, maybe some people will be a bit like, I have had some comments where it's like, oh, what's the point? Why are you doing that?
Okay.
And I'd just be like, well, I want to keep the stories alive. I want to do it. And they just can't get it. They can't get their head around it. But so I have had a bit of that. But I suppose as an artist, it's kind of like my muse, really. So there is obviously because of the stuff I do online of sharing clips and stuff. I think it gives the impression that I'm like in the festivals.
Right.
And I have got to know a lot of people within the festival, made a lot of good friends and stuff. And I do, to be honest, get carried away and just have a good time and a good drink and stay up and stuff. So that, you make friends that way. That's what it's all about. So I think people appreciate that I'm part of that side of it. And then a lot of them aren't too fussed about the art, to be honest, which I kind of like because, why should they be?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you
And your book,
intentionally craft like, do you like different interviewers have very strong personas? Like the one I can think of is like Louis Theroux's got a very particular gonzo kind of thing. Did you consider any of that before you went and started documenting? Did you go like, I'm going to make sure I say this, or or do you just go totally, this is
I cut
Ben,
my voice
this is who
out.
I am?
So well, I did a film recently about Avebury that's, you could say it's a little bit more on the Louis Theroux side. It's like investigating the community and what it's all about. But like all the film work I've done has been completely intuitive. So I was I'm a painter fundamentally, and then that practice has grown out. But like when I was first going to them, I was just literally sending like filmed portrait on my phone back to my wife, and she'd be like really excited, loving it. Oh, you got to put that online. So I would, and then all of a sudden I was getting loads of followers and people at first kind of laughing at it, and then all of a sudden people like, wow. And it like, I started building an audience for my art basically. And then I was always looking for a reason to go back because I'd make the painting and be like, oh, I can't go back again. I've got, limited budgets. I've got to find new subjects. But then I would like create a little story in my head. Oh, but you've only filmed it upright. You need to get some proper footage. So I go back, film it again, and then I think, oh, all those stories and people I spoke to, I should have interviewed them. So I started going back and interviewing people. So it just evolved, and then it was like all of a sudden I got all this footage. And then I decided in 2019 it was too sporadic and all over the place. So I'm going to go and do a year, 20 traditions, which was ambitious because I was away all the time and a lot of drink involved.
That's an excellent list of business expenses when you hand that over to an accountant and go, these are all the pubs I had to go to, I'm afraid.
Yes, exactly. And all the people I had to buy drinks for to thank them for their time and interviewing me and all that. So then I made that film. And then since then we had COVID. And then I've been back to a few of them, like the Bury Man, which is the man covered in these burdock seeds. I go back pretty much every year. I've been back to Padstow, and I want to go back to them all. But then at the same time, as an artist, I'm hungry for like the new and like ideas. So there was a bit of a conflict with me for a while about like back. Like I want to go back, but I can't.
And you've been off around different bits of Europe recently, right?
I was going to say,
this is
you're
the future.
Switzerland. Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, well, that's the future. You see, like I say earlier, like there's like it's almost like the metaphors within the traditions that speak to me, and like there's this Swiss tradition called Sylvester Clausen that actually, strangely, I'd known about for years before I was even making work about folklore, because on the Grand Budapest Hotel soundtrack of the Wes Anderson film, there's this like beautiful yodeling. I was like, I need some more of that. I need to find that. So I listened to the soundtrack and then went on this loophole of finding the music. It turns out it was the yodeling from this tradition. And I remember just watching hours on YouTube of it and like kind of forgetting about it. But the one thing that did stick in my mind was that there was 3 groups within the tradition: the ugly, the pretty ugly, and the pretty. So the pretty have all their clothes, all their outfits beautifully crafted. They're very like, they almost draw inspiration from like the man-made elements of the landscape. They have like lights in them, and some are in like Ferris wheel shapes and stuff like that. Oh, wow. And then you have the pretty ugly, which is like similar to that costume, but it's all made of natural material. So like they'll build masks of like pine cones and things. And then the ugly, just cute, like wild men with like grotesque
Just
faces
bog
and stuff.
monster.
Yes, exactly. But like, and for me, it was like, oh my God, it's like the dualities of the human condition in one tradition. It's like they've separated one person, all the sides of us. We don't want the ugly, do we? So we tend to be pretty, but then we've got the pretty ugly side where we can bring both together, and that's probably the true self. So basically I've got a whole idea around doing a triptych of these different groups and stuff, but I won't be able to start that till next year. So but this is what I mean, it's always things like that draw me in. It's like something about it that says something beyond, and it's become more and more like that. When it was the Frontline Folklore series, it was very much what I wasn't quite sure I was interested at that point, so I was going with my intuition. It would be like, that looks interesting, straw bear, I'm going to go to that. And then I'd start painting them. The more you kind of reflect and as time passes, like that's become the best lesson I've learned from the work I've been doing. Is when I was at art school, I used to get really frustrated with this whole idea of like the concept side of it, because I used to like overthink and try and, I suppose it's natural human instinct, because if you have to come up with the idea before you've done the work, you're naturally going to think, it needs to be clever. Needs to be this. I better read this book, better read that book. And before you've even lifted a paintbrush, you're bored and insecure because you're not that passionate about it, because it's trying to impress other people. And, so when I saw the Druids, I'm just going to go with this. I don't know the hell why I'm interested in it. But and then all this, what you read in the book came out of that. And I'm still on that kind of conjecture. That's how I hope to continue.
There's something so much more powerful about that, though, isn't there? About like doing, because if you're
those like journey,
those metaphors of like, this tells us about ourselves, and whoa,
there's some weird
everything all right?
Something went pop. That's okay.
I didn't hear it myself.
The thing you're saying about like the metaphors underneath the like conceptualism, and that idea of, there's a pretty and there's an ugly and then there's a bit in between, and like that. It wouldn't work if you summarized that into a book of like, here's a tiny book, there's like two sentences on each page, there's a pretty and an ugly, and shouldn't we be in the middle? It just wouldn't have the impact, that being a big thing. And it's like, actually, to get this very simple thing across, the communities have worked out that we have to do this big, grand, immersive thing, because that's part of it, I think, is the immersive bit of it. So much of what I feel like a lot of folklore-y things that are done through mainstream education in the UK are not done in a very immersive way. They're done like in an assembly, or they're done in a way where you're still almost like, you sit in an assembly in rows, you are essentially behind a screen. The Harvest Festival is up at the front of the hall, and you don't really go and interact with it. You maybe sing a song, but then you go. Whereas being in the middle of like Ottery St Mary as a flaming tar barrel goes past you, that's not the same as a harvest assembly.
No,
those big,
the danger element.
Definitely.
I think also what really interests me about it as well is it's like the materials that are used to make the costumes. Like I did these sculptures inspired by it, where I covered these mannequins in flowers, artificial flowers, called it man-made nature, because I suppose the more I went to these things and I saw the costumes all made of like, people dressing as plants and stuff, it started making me think about, we associate our man-made products as something separate to nature. And that's almost where it's kind of gone wrong, because like, it's like, we can make what we want, but actually everything's coming from nature. So it is a type of man-made nature, but it's just irresponsible man-made nature. So you can start thinking about the materials you're using. Like, should I be taking that? Does it grow back? Should I, I suppose that for me was another thing that interests me about it.
Yeah. I'm conscious that we've kept you for a good amount of time.
Oh, has that gone already? It's flown by.
Well, we could go on talking for ages and ages, but I just wondered, as a kind of parting thought for a lot of our listeners who are kind of involved in forest school and maybe are in positions where they could either reinstate a local tradition that maybe had gone by the by, like wassailing, for example. Like I went to a wassail at a village down the road in a community orchard the other day, and it was their first definitely not their first ever one, their first one in living
Yeah.
memory. You know, I'm sure that village had orchards as far as the eye could see, you know, a couple of hundred years ago, and it would have been a commonplace thing. And this first wassail, I mean, it was led by the village school, so a lot of the teachers were a lot of the positions who were kind of speaking, and the children were dressed up and things, and they did it almost like a pantomime with a rhyming script that they'd written that really explained very clearly to everybody what this thing was, because I'm sure a lot of people who have been there were like, I don't even know what wassail is. What? You know, so there was a lot of very, very clear rhyming language about, and now if you will follow me, we will go and bless
Even
the
after
trees.
you've explained a wassail, it's not 100% like
absolutely.
How do you explain it?
Yeah, as opposed to
that's
other
what's so fun about it.
Yeah, you know, I've been to other wassails in other places where it is just insane. From the minute you get there are Morris dancers dancing with flaming sticks, and a guy who my kids called Broccoli, which was the Green Man. They're like, why is there a guy dressed as Broccoli? Like, who is he? You know, but yes, getting back to what I was about to say was, so some of our listeners might be in a position where either with groups, local communities, children in the woods or wherever, might be in a position where they could reinstate an old tradition or maybe start a new one. Do you have any kind of like words of, just bearing in mind what you've seen in your travels, the kind of thing, like words of encouragement or what it's all about, or
so the best demonstration of this right in front of my eyes is a new festival called the Black Shook Festival in Bungay. So Bungay in Suffolk, they have their local story, which is about, as most places do, which is all about this black dog that burst into a church. I think it was in 15 something or 16 something, killed some of the worshippers and left some marks in the door, and he was seen at another church, he attacked. So there's this whole like local legend around the Black Shook. So some friends of mine set up the Black Shook Festival, and I think this year it'll be like, the year that I went was year 2 and year 3. And because the story was rooted in the local history, it was already belonged. So already now it's like the Black Shooks everywhere. Businesses are called Black Shook this, and it just made complete sense. It felt ancient, and everybody straight away got in on it and jumped on it, and it's growing and growing. So my advice would be, like, the best thing to do is, if you want to do something new, is also root it in the past by your local folklore, so it has that kind of identity of the place, you know, and then it will feel authentic, and then I think it gives it like an extra power. So I think that maybe look to your local folk tales, and you could start. You'll be inspired to start something.
Yeah. Love it.
Oh,
thank
Ben,
you so
thank
much.
you so much for chatting.
Yeah.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, it's been great. If listeners want to find out more about what you're up to and hear about your upcoming exhibition and stuff, where are the best places to look and find that info?
Yeah, so you can, if you go, I've got my website, benedge.co.uk, and as you on the homepage, if you scroll down, you'll see you can sign up to my mailing list. That's probably the most definite way you'll get my news. Then my Instagram, I'm very active on Ben Edge Art, and then just, I think, Facebook, I'm on there, but probably Instagram and my website. Signing up to the mailing list is where you should. My mailing list, I do like, I update with like my field work, so you'll get a little load of the trips, like my research trips and what I'm up to, and my exhibitions and things like that. Yeah.
Brilliant. Oh, thank you so much. Can't wait to see all the stuff about the exhibition. When can we go? Can we go on a field trip to London, please?
Oh, definitely, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm there already.
Can I actually just plug one last thing before we go?
Yeah.
Of course,
I've
please
actually
do.
I've got an exhibition opening that I've curated in Cheltenham at the Wilson Collection, the Cheltenham Trust, and that's opening next week on the 21st. And this is about kind of our relationship to nature around land access. So it's all going to be historical objects from their collection mixed with contemporary art. So that's something you can see very soon if you're in that area.
That's so cool.
Feel
What's
the
it called?
feathers
The
being
exhibition?
ruffled.
What's it called?
It's called Common. Oh yeah, of course, Common Ground. It's called
Brilliant.
Common Ground, and it's at the Wilson Collection. That's the Cheltenham Trust.
Okay. Is this sort of your path crossing with Right to Roam kind of people?
Yes.
Or...
Well, inspired, I would say. But I do know a lot of the people involved in Right to Roam, and I've been on one big trespass that I helped arrange with Nick Hayes, which was a lot of
Brilliant.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
he's in the show, Nick Hayes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, right. Well, thank you very much, Ben.
My pleasure.
lush.
It's been great.
Great to meet you.
And keep in touch.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
likewise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cheers, mate.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.